sold Grandma's piano during a pool party and called the guests family while I slept in my car outside the Walmart. When I asked for her wedding ring, he filed a police report and had me arrested for burglary. The priest was still speaking during my grandmother's funeral when Anton's text popped up. Already at the house, someone needs to maintain the property. There was no will found, so everything went to her only immediate heir, her son. I found them that night, unpacking their entire lives into her rooms. My childhood bedroom, where Grandma held me through my parents' divorce, was already a gaming den. Her handmade quilts lay piled in the hallway like garbage. Grandma's rose garden lasted exactly 1 week, so I was forced to watch as the excavator tore through the exact spot where she'd taken her last breath. 40 years of heritage roses, including the pink climber from her wedding bouquet, torn out for an above-ground pool. I watched Anton toss the bushes into a dumpster, roots and all, whistling. Her china appeared on Facebook Marketplace within days. Vintage finds, price to move. The leather-bound books she read to me were boxed for a garage sale. Her jewelry box vanished overnight. When I asked, Anton's wife smirked at me, already wearing Grandma's pearl necklace. Every weekend, bass from their parties shook walls that once held quiet Sunday dinners. The smell of cigarettes replaced her lavender sachets. They sold her piano during the second party, hauled it out while guests did shots in her kitchen. I tried to convince him to save her treasures, but he said I was lucky to still have a place to live. All I'd managed to do was hide one rose cutting behind the shed, visited it at dawn, watering it like she taught me, whispering prayers in Polish. Grandma would have turned 90 next week. I made the mistake of asking Anton if I could host a memorial dinner. He actually laughed. Pool party invites were already sent. I just wanted her recipe box, the wooden one her mother brought from Poland. I found Anton's wife dumping it in the trash, coffee grounds already staining the index cards. When I begged, she looked me dead in the eye and slammed the lid. That night, I snuck into the bedroom for Grandma's wedding ring. She'd worn it 67 years, never removed it once. Anton's wife had it on her nightstand like a trophy. I took what was mine by promise. Anton filed a police report the next morning. Theft, breaking, and entering. They kicked me out with nothing, not even photos. 3 nights in a mildew-stinking motel while they accelerated their plan. Estate sale. Everything must go. Her sewing machine, her mother's wedding dress, the kitchen table with my grape juice stain, gone to strangers for pennies, the door frame with our pencil-marked heights painted over. Last night, I broke in again. Desperate. Stupid. I needed something of hers. The house already reeked of strangers. Her cross was missing from above the doorway. In the bathroom, pages from her diary lay next to the toilet. The neighbors saw me and called the cops. Anton pressed charges, burglary this time, 18 hours in holding. When they released me, even her grave had been violated. My fresh flowers were gone. The Polish flag was missing. The rosary I'd draped over her headstone had vanished. Even the heart I'd made from stones was kicked apart. I sobbed in the cemetery dirt until Mrs. Bankowski found me. Grandma's neighbor of 30 years helped me stand. In Mrs. Bankowski's kitchen, still smelling of their shared afternoon tea, she pulled a box from above her refrigerator. Inside was Grandma's real jewelry, photos spanning 90 years, her actual recipe box, and a letter addressed to me. It said, "My darling girl, by the time you read this, I will be gone. What I want you to always remember what matters, our real treasures, our memories. We come from survivors, so survive." Inside the box was also a bank book, an account in my name, $60,000 saved penny by penny. Mrs. Bankowski held me as I cried. In her greenhouse, a new rose grew from one of Grandma's bushes. She'd prepared for everything. Anton had tried this when his father died. Grandma stopped him then. She knew once she was gone, he would have his way. But Mrs. Bankowski told me that she was my grandmother's witness when she'd filed her will. Anton had no idea. When I met with the lawyer, he said, "Anton's about to learn why you don't mess with Polish grandmothers, even dead ones." The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and coffee. I sat across from him, clutching the bank book like a lifeline while he spread papers across his mahogany desk. His fingers traced the will's edges as he explained the authentication process. The document needed verification through probate court, which meant filing fees, court appearances, and waiting. Always waiting. I emptied my savings account that afternoon. $3,000 for the retainer, another $1,500 for filing fees. The bank teller counted bills while I calculated how many months I could survive. My apartment lease was up next week. The choice was simple: pay rent or pay lawyers. The eviction notice arrived 2 days later. My landlord slipped it under the door while I was at the courthouse filing paperwork. 30 days to vacate. I packed methodically, sorting belongings into keep and sell piles. Most went into the sell pile. Grandma's bank book stayed in my purse, but I couldn't touch that money yet. Not until the will was authenticated. Anton showed up at my building the morning I moved out. He leaned against his new truck, watching me carry boxes to my car. His breathing quickened when I walked past. Sharp and shallow, exactly like Grandma had described in her last voicemail. The one where she'd whispered about feeling scared. My car became home. I parked in different lots each night, showered at the gym, kept my work clothes wrinkle-free in a garment bag. The back seat held everything I owned. Grandma's photos stayed in a waterproof container under the passenger seat. Sister's school called on Thursday. There was confusion about pickup authorization. I drove there immediately, finding Anton already in the principal's office. We both had legal right to collect her. The principal looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Sister sat in the corner, backpack clutched to her chest. I explained about the will, about Anton's deception. The words tumbled out, rehearsed from sleepless nights in parking lots. The school security guard shifted uncomfortably. My voice rose as I described the excavator destroying Grandma's roses. Anton sat calmly, occasionally shaking his head with practiced concern. The principal suggested we sort this out privately. The security guard's hand moved to his radio when I refused to leave without Sister. He walked me to the parking lot, his grip firm on my elbow. Through the office window, I watched Anton kneel beside Sister, speaking softly. She nodded and took his hand. Sister's teacher caught up with me in the parking lot. She glanced around nervously before speaking. The custody confusion was concerning. She had obligations to report unclear family situations, but she also understood grief could complicate things. She'd wait a week for us to provide clear documentation. My lawyer called that evening with more requirements. The will's witness signature needed verification. Mrs. Bankowski would need to appear in court. The authentication process would take months, not weeks. Each day meant more fees, more hearings, more proof that Grandma was was competent when she signed. I slept fitfully in the Walmart parking lot, calculating costs. Will authentication would run at least $10,000. Appeals if Anton contested. Court costs. Expert witnesses. The $60,000 in Grandma's account would disappear into legal fees before I ever touched it. Anton's social media posts showed sister's weekend visits, ice cream trips, movie nights, her own bedroom in Grandma's house. In one photo, she wore new clothes, held shopping bags, smiled genuinely. The caption read, "Providing stability during difficult times." He'd mentioned Grandma's complaints during our last phone call, how I never visited, how I was always too busy. The words stung because they held truth. I'd missed her last 5 birthdays. Work, life, always something more important than Sunday dinner. The custody hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning. I'd already requested time off for the will authentication hearing on Monday. My supervisor's patience was wearing thin. The nursing shortage meant everyone pulled extra shifts, but I kept disappearing for court dates. I chose the will hearing. Showed up Monday in my least wrinkled suit, hair pulled back, trying to look stable. Anton's lawyer argued procedural delays. The judge granted another continuance, 6 weeks until the next hearing. I sat in my car afterward, too tired to cry. Tuesday came anyway. I arrived late to family court, having overslept in a rest stop. The judge noted my tardiness. Anton's lawyer presented his client's stable employment history. 10 years at the same company, never missed a day. They'd prepared a folder documenting his reliability. After court, I drove to Grandma's grave. Someone had left fresh flowers. Anton, probably, making sure the groundskeeper saw him visiting. I sat in the grass, telling her about the legal maze, the mounting costs, the impossible choices. A church group walked past, heading to another service. They recognized Anton's flowers, mentioned how he came every Sunday, how his grief touched their hearts. Sister's therapy appointment was that week. I'd promised to take her months ago, back when Grandma first got sick. Anton's lawyer submitted documentation showing I'd missed the last 4 sessions. Sister had been going with Anton instead. The therapist's notes mentioned her anxiety about family instability. I called my cousin that night, hoping for support. His voice was strained. Anton had loaned him money for his daughter's surgery last year, $15,000 when no bank would help. He couldn't testify against the man who saved his baby's life, so Anton texted during the funeral that he's already maintaining the property. Nothing says grief like immediately measuring for new curtains while the priest is still talking. Family was complicated. He wished me luck and hung up. The grocery store incident happened Thursday. I was buying ramen when the clerk asked me to shop elsewhere. Anton's wife had complained about feeling stalked. Other customers stared as I left. The whole strip mall was apparently off limits now. I drove to a store across town. 3 crises hit simultaneously the following week. The eviction from my storage unit for non-payment. The will's authentication delayed because Mrs. Bankowski was in the hospital. Sister's teacher calling about missed therapy appointments. I juggled phone calls from the courthouse parking lot, each problem spawning 2 more. Work suffered. I made medication errors, forgot to chart properly, missed shift changes. Nothing major, but enough for complaints. The nursing supervisor called me in. My personal situation was affecting patient care. I needed to sort things out or face suspension. Anton's breathing haunted me. That quick, shallow pattern from Grandma's voicemail. She'd called me 3 times that night. I'd been at a work party. Phone on silent. By morning, she was gone. The phone records would show those unanswered calls. Evidence of my absence when she needed me most. My best friend met me for coffee, paid because I couldn't afford it. She mentioned awkwardly that Anton had co-signed her car loan 2 years ago. Her credit was shot after her divorce. He'd helped without hesitation. She supported me, but couldn't provide testimony that might hurt him. The lawyer called with updates. Anton's filing claimed I was harassing the family. My daily drives past Grandma's house, while technically legal, established a pattern. The security footage from Sister's school showed me agitated. The grocery store complaint added weight. A restraining order might be coming. I found the will that night, hidden in Grandma's recipe box that Mrs. Bankowski had saved. My hands shook as I photographed it. Finally, concrete proof. I sat in my car, allowing myself one moment of relief. Outside, Anton's daughter walked past, saw me, snapped a photo. Within hours, it was online. Gold digger celebrates screwing our family. The comments were brutal. Anton's wife shared it widely. Their narrative was simple. A absent granddaughter returning only for money. They had photos from every holiday I'd missed. 5 years of empty chairs at Christmas dinner. Meanwhile, Anton was there, helping, caring, earning what he'd inherited. I met Anton at the bank the next day. We sat across from each other in the manager's office, both realizing what came next. Complete family destruction. One of us might face criminal charges. Sister would be traumatized regardless of who won. The extended family would choose sides, creating rifts lasting generations. His hands shook slightly as he signed paperwork. For a moment, his mask slipped. We were both exhausted, both convinced we were right, both destroying what Grandma had loved most, family unity. The bank manager looked between us with poorly concealed judgment. That night, I parked outside the 24-hour Walmart and opened Grandma's letter again. We come from survivors, so survive. But at what cost? The war had barely started, and already the casualties were mounting. Sister, caught between us, family relationships shattered, Grandma's legacy reduced to legal documents and dollar signs. I thought about her final months, how Anton had been there while I worked overtime shifts, how his name was on her medical forms as emergency contact, how he'd driven her to appointments, managed her medications, held her hand through the fear. The truth was complicated, painted in shades of gray neither of us wanted to acknowledge. But then I remembered the roses, the systematic destruction of everything she'd cherished, the pearl necklace on his wife's nightstand, the recipe cards in the trash. Whatever care he'd provided was tainted by what came after. Grandma knew. That's why she'd prepared, why she'd hidden money, why she'd warned Mrs. Bankowski. The authentication hearing was reset for 6 weeks out. More time for Anton to solidify his position. More missed work for me. More confusion for Sister. More legal fees draining my resources. The system moved slowly while life accelerated around us. I fell asleep at a red light after 3 days without proper rest. The officer knocked on my window, ran my license, noted I appeared impaired. No charges, but another report in Anton's favor. Another piece of evidence that I was unstable, unreliable, unfit. The war grandmother had predicted was here. Anton and I circled each other like wary animals, each convinced of our righteousness. But wars have no winners, only survivors. And as I sat in that parking parking lot, surrounded by everything I owned. I wondered if survival was worth the price we'd all pay. Anton's wife befriended my NA sponsor the following week. They met at the coffee shop where recovery meetings gathered, bonding over shared experiences. My sponsor texted me photos of them laughing together, unaware of the connection. Anton's wife shared stories about grandma helping her through detox, how she'd held her hair during withdrawal sweats. The manipulation was brilliant, genuine connection weaponized. The court mediator scheduled our first session. We sat in separate rooms while she shuttled between us, trying to understand the conflict. I described Anton's systematic destruction of grandma's belongings as evidence of greed. She returned from his room with notes describing the same events as necessary estate management during overwhelming grief. The mediator's expression grew increasingly strained. Discovery phase began with Anton's lawyer subpoenaing my social media history. They printed posts from my college years, highlighting one from sophomore year where I'd joked about waiting for my inheritance ship to come in. The timestamp showed I'd posted it after failing an exam, clearly venting frustration. Context didn't matter. The lawyer circled key phrases with red pen. Sister started therapy drawings that week. The counselor shared them during our joint session, required by the custody evaluation. Dark scribbles represented me, while Anton appeared as bright yellow sunshine. In one drawing, I stood outside a house trying to break in while Sister cowered inside. She'd captioned it with shaky letters. She says you're trying to steal our house. Anton's doorbell camera footage emerged during depositions. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m., 3 nights before Grandma died. She appeared at his door alone, nightgown billowing in the wind, clearly confused. Neither of us had mentioned this visit. The footage contradicted both our narratives about her final days. We watched her ring the doorbell repeatedly until Anton answered. The family court investigator interviewed us separately. Her questions focused on Sister's welfare, but she kept circling back to the inheritance dispute. Her notes, which I glimpsed upside down, included phrases about my fixation on financial matters over child welfare. She underlined it twice. I used Grandma's banking passwords that night, accessing accounts online. Anton's name appeared as an authorized user 6 months before her death. The power of attorney documents were dated during her first hospitalization. Each withdrawal matched his signature. The evidence felt damning until I realized I'd just admitted to unauthorized account access. Anton's wife posted grief photos on Facebook, creating a digital memorial. The images spanned years. Anton helping Grandma garden, fixing her roof, driving her to church. I appeared in none of them. 5 Christmases, 5 Thanksgivings, 5 Easters. Empty chairs where I should have been. The comments praised Anton's devotion while questioning where I'd been. My therapist received a subpoena the next week. Privileged communications had exceptions, the lawyer explained. My sessions about Anton, about my anger, about revenge fantasies, all discoverable. I watched her pack session notes into boxes, her face apologetic, but her hands complying with legal requirements. On Grandma's birthday, I arrived at the cemetery early, bringing her favorite yellow roses. Anton was already there, kneeling at her headstone, his shoulders shaking with genuine sobs. He'd brought the same flowers. We stood on opposite sides of her grave, neither speaking. His grief looked real because it was real. My certainty wavered. The school implemented new pickup procedures requiring both parties present for Sister's medication administration. Every afternoon, we stood in the nurse's office while Sister took her anxiety medication. She'd developed stomach problems since the conflict started. The nurse weighed her weekly. The numbers kept dropping. Grandma's doctor refused to discuss her competency without a court order. I sat in his waiting room for 3 hours before his receptionist explained he couldn't risk his license over family drama. Medical ethics prevented him from taking sides. He'd testify only under subpoena and only to medical facts. Reviewing Anton's tax returns revealed he'd claimed Grandma as a dependent for 3 years. Medical expense deductions totaled more than he'd reported spending on her care. The discrepancy suggested either tax fraud or hidden income. My forensic accountant flagged suspicious patterns, but proving intentional deception required more evidence. Anton made an offer through his lawyer. I could choose 10 items from Grandma's house if I signed a quitclaim deed, 10 memories in exchange for dropping all challenges. The offer arrived with photos of available items: her sewing machine, photo albums, the rocking chair where she'd held me. Each image twisted the knife deeper. My refusal triggered a new filing. Anton's lawyer argued I was prioritizing money over Sister's stability and mental health. They included the counselor's reports, the school's concerns, the weight loss documentation. Oh, my heart goes out to everyone involved in this painful situation. The way they're both genuinely grieving while fighting shows how much they actually cared about Grandma. That moment at the cemetery with the yellow roses, they both remembered what she loved. The narrative was clear. I was destroying a child's life for personal gain. Researching the will's date revealed it was signed 2 weeks after Grandma's mild stroke. Medical records from that period showed cognitive evaluations scoring borderline on competency tests. The gray area gave both sides ammunition. She'd been impaired but not incompetent, confused but not incapacitated. Mrs. Bankowski called me from her daughter's house. She'd moved there temporarily after the stress triggered her own health issues. She mentioned a box Grandma had given her months ago for safekeeping. Inside were cassette tapes, old technology Grandma trusted more than digital recordings. Mrs. Bankowski promised to mail them immediately. The tapes arrived in a padded envelope. Grandma's voice filled my car as I listened in the Walmart parking lot. She documented her wishes, her love for both Anton and me, her gratitude for his care. Then came the crucial recording, her promising Anton the house during a moment of lucid gratitude. My stomach dropped. She'd meant it. My father finally returned my calls. His voice carried exhaustion as he explained his position. He loved both his children, couldn't choose sides. Grandma had wanted peace, not this war. His neutrality meant no access to family documents he'd stored, no testimony about Grandma's mental state, no support in court. Through a friend at the hospital, I learned Anton's AA sponsor was Victoria, my former coworker. She'd mentioned concerns about Anton's recent behavior during staff meetings. His attendance had dropped, his sharing had become aggressive. The stress was pushing him toward relapse. I filed this information away, unsure whether to use it. I encountered Anton's wife at the pharmacy. She stood in line, clutching a prescription bag, her hands trembling. The pharmacist called out the medication name, Xanax for panic attacks. She saw me and quickly looked away. The family wasn't handling handling the stress any better than I was. Bank security footage subpoenaed by Anton's lawyer showed him helping Grandma to the ATM every Friday. She leaned heavily on his arm, sometimes confused about her PIN. The withdrawals were consistent, $300 cash each week. The money trail led nowhere specific, just daily expenses Anton claimed he covered. Grandma's hairdresser emerged with her own claim. She'd styled Grandma's hair free for 15 years with promises of eventual payment. Now she wanted her due from the estate. Her documentation was thin, but her timing was strategic. Another creditor meant less inheritance to fight over, more complexity in probate court. Sister's stomach problems worsened. Multiple doctor visits revealed stress-induced gastritis. I missed 2 appointments due to court dates, while Anton attended everyone. He texted me photos from the waiting room, sister curled in his lap, clearly suffering. His message was simple but effective. She needed stability more than I needed the house. My legal retainer depleted faster than expected. I pawned my laptop, sold my good jewelry, emptied my retirement account. Meanwhile, construction sounds came from Grandma's house. Anton was renovating the kitchen with money that should have been frozen during probate. Each improvement increased the home's value and his claim to it. The confrontation at Grandma's dentist office happened by accident. We both arrived to collect her dental records. The receptionist, who'd known Grandma for decades, broke down crying as we argued in the waiting room. She begged us to stop, saying Grandma would be heartbroken. Other patients stared as she sobbed about Grandma's kindness. My nursing supervisor called me in again. A patient had complained about distracted and dangerous care. The patient was Anton's wife's mother, though I only learned this after the complaint was filed. My hands had shaken during fourth insertion. I'd confused medications. The suspension was immediate, pending investigation. Living in my car became harder as winter approached. I parked outside 24-hour Walmarts, running the engine for heat until gas money ran out. Meanwhile, Anton hosted a grief support group in Grandma's living room. I watched through the window as strangers sat in her chairs, sharing their pain in her sacred space. My mother broke her silence with a phone call. Her voice was flat, defeated. She'd watched her children destroy each other over money. I'd become someone she didn't recognize, someone Grandma wouldn't recognize. The accusation hit harder than any legal filing. She ended the call with advice to accept Anton's offer and move on. Mrs. Bankowski faced her own crisis because of me. The IRS questioned the $60,000 account Grandma had saved in my name, gift tax implications, unreported transfers, potential fraud investigations. Mrs. Bankowski's daughter demanded she stop helping me to protect their family's finances. The collateral damage spread wider. I apologized to Mrs. Bankowski in person, driving to her daughter's house. She looked frailer, older, worn down by legal pressure. I explained I had to pursue the truth for Grandma's sake. She nodded sadly, agreeing to testify but warning me about the cost of righteousness. Her daughter glared from the doorway. Sister confronted me after school one day. Anton waited in the car while she asked why I hadn't helped Grandma when she was alive. The question hung between us. I couldn't answer without admitting my neglect, my absence, my prioritization of work over family. She walked back to Anton's car without waiting for an answer. During a deposition, I admitted to taking medications from Grandma's house before the official inventory. They were her pain pills, left over from her final weeks. I'd been desperate, exhausted, in pain from sleeping in my car. The admission would paint me as an addict, a thief, someone who'd steal from the dead. Bank statements entered into evidence showed more painful truths. I'd promised Grandma monthly deposits to help with expenses. The transfers stopped after 6 months when my own finances tightened. The statements showed her asking about the money and text messages I'd ignored. Anton's lawyer highlighted each unanswered request. Anton filed for immediate custody of sister, citing my homelessness and instability. The hearing was scheduled during my work hours, forcing me to choose between income and sister. I chose sister, arriving at court in wrinkled scrubs, hair unwashed, looking exactly as unstable as they claimed. Reading Anton's journals, subpoenaed during discovery, revealed his perspective. Years of sacrifice documented in careful handwriting. Every missed holiday I'd skipped, he'd been there. Every medical appointment, every grocery run, every night Grandma called scared and confused. His resentment was earned, his claim to inheritance justified by sweat equity. The recordings of Grandma's confusion were the hardest evidence to present. Her voice, frightened and lost, asking for people long dead. Sister covered her ears during playback, crying for me to stop. The judge ordered a recess. In the bathroom, I vomited bile, disgusted by what I'd become. I studied Anton's tactics and adopted them, filed complaints about his drinking, documented his absences from work, photographed him buying alcohol. The transformation was complete. I'd become the manipulator I'd accused him of being. The mirror in the courthouse bathroom reflected someone I didn't recognize. Court-ordered substance testing revealed what I'd suspected. Anton had relapsed under stress, alcohol in his system during a random screening. The victory felt hollow as I watched him process the results. His recovery, years of hard work, destroyed by our war. Sister would suffer most from his relapse. The restraining order was modified but not lifted. I could drive past Grandma's house once weekly. During one pass, I saw Anton teaching Sister to cook in Grandma's kitchen. They used the same worn recipe cards I'd begged for. Sister laughed at something he said, flour in her hair, looking happy for the first time in months. Anton's counterclaim included detailed receipts, $47,000 over 5 years, gas receipts for medical appointments, grocery bills, pharmacy costs, home repairs. Each receipt told a story of daily care I hadn't provided. The total exceeded what he'd allegedly stolen. The math was complicated, the moral calculation more so. Everything hinged on proving Grandma's signature was coerced versus given in gratitude. Handwriting experts analyzed pressure patterns, stroke consistency, signature flow. The results were inconclusive. The signature was definitely hers, but her state of mind remained unprovable. Science couldn't determine the difference between gratitude and manipulation. Anton's teenage son begged me to stop during a chance encounter at the grocery store. His father had made mistakes but loved Grandma genuinely. The boy's eyes were red from crying. His family was falling apart. His parents fought constantly. His little sister had nightmares. He asked if Grandma would want this. The church congregation split over the dispute. Half supported the devoted son who'd sacrificed everything. Half backed the granddaughter fighting for her inheritance. Sunday services became tense. Whispered conversations stopped when either of us appeared. The priest attempted mediation, but found the divide too deep to bridge. My lawyer explained the legal reality. Proving undue influence required showing Anton isolated Grandma from others. The evidence showed the opposite. He'd driven her to social events, church, doctor appointments. Being present wasn't manipulation. Providing care wasn't coercion. The law distinguished between influence and undue influence. I tracked down Grandma's attorney in Florida. He'd retired after her stroke, worried about her increasing confusion. His affidavit confirmed she'd been forgetful, but not incompetent. Wow, hearing Grandma's actual voice on those cassette tapes, the way she genuinely promised Anton the house during a moment of clarity changes everything. This isn't the villain story anyone expected. He'd advised her to update her will, but couldn't confirm if she had. He wouldn't return to testify, citing health concerns and travel difficulties. The affidavit revealed more painful truths. Grandma knew Anton was taking money, but felt she owed him for his care. She'd been torn between fairness and gratitude, love and obligation. The attorney had documented her guilt over favoring Anton, but also her fear that I wasn't ready for responsibility. Then came the sealed envelope. Grandma's attorney had kept it with instructions to open only if the will was contested. Inside, her handwriting explained everything. She knew both her grandchildren's flaws, Anton's greed, my absence. She'd chosen based on who needed help most, who'd shown up, who'd earned it through presence. The letter revealed Grandma's pragmatism. She knew I'd survive without the inheritance. I had education, career, independence. Anton had sacrificed those things for her care. The house was payment for services rendered, not favoritism. She'd made a business decision dressed as love. I committed to winning despite the mounting casualties. Grandma had started this war by dividing her assets unequally. I'd finish it by proving Anton's manipulation. The forensic accountant found patterns in the withdrawals. Cash amounts matched Anton's deposits within days. The money trail suggested systematic theft disguised as care. Presenting evidence meant watching sister sob in Anton's wife's arms. The family fractured visibly in the courtroom. Cousins chose sides. Aunts stopped speaking. Uncle Benjamin refused to attend, saying Grandma would weep at what we'd become. The judge ordered forensic accounting to untangle the financial web. Both sides received 1 week to consider settlement before trial. The mediator emphasized sister's welfare, the family destruction, the financial drain on both parties. Anton and I sat across a conference table, both looking haggard. His hands shook, withdrawal or stress. Mine shook from exhaustion. We'd aged years and months. The settlement conference included the entire extended family. 8 hours in one room with Grandma's empty chair at the table's head. Everyone spoke about their losses, their pain, their memories of Grandma. The mediator walked through every receipt, every timestamp, every medical record. The truth emerged in painful detail. Anton's wife finally broke. She admitted pushing him to secure the inheritance. They'd given up everything to care for Grandma. Careers, savings, plans. The house felt like justified compensation. She sobbed about changing adult diapers, cleaning vomit, holding Grandma through terrifying confusion. The care had been real, even if the motives were mixed. The judge ordered psychiatric evaluations for everyone seeking custody of sister. We sat in separate waiting rooms, filling out questionnaires about our mental health, our stability, our ability to provide care. The irony wasn't lost. We'd destroyed our sanity fighting over sister's welfare. Evidence proved Anton's financial exploitation, but also my emotional abandonment. We'd both failed Grandma in different ways. He'd stolen money while providing care. I'd preserved integrity while providing absence. The moral scales balanced in the worst way possible. Neither of us deserved the inheritance we'd destroyed ourselves pursuing. Anton's breakdown came during final mediation. Renovation costs had spiraled beyond the inheritance value. He'd depleted his savings trying to increase the house's worth. Now he faced bankruptcy regardless of the outcome. His relapse had cost him his job. His marriage was failing. He'd won the house but lost everything else. I was offered the chance to speak about sister's needs. My voice cracked as I described wanting to provide stability I couldn't offer. Living in my car disqualified me from custody. Unemployment made me unable to support her. The fight for inheritance had cost me the ability to care for the child it was meant to protect. The mediator's pen scratched across her notepad as I finished explaining my limitations. She nodded, made more notes, then excused herself to speak with Anton's team. Through the glass partition, I watched him slump forward, head in his hands. His teenage son rubbed his back while his wife stared at the wall. Sister's guardian ad litem arrived late, apologizing for traffic. She carried a thick folder containing sister's medical records, school reports, and therapy notes. The mediator briefed her quickly before calling us all back together. The guardian's expression remained neutral as she reviewed documentation from both sides. We spent the next hour examining financial records in excruciating detail. The forensic accountant's report laid bare every transaction, every pattern, every discrepancy. Anton's withdrawals from Grandma's accounts totaled $38,000 over 18 months. My absence from her life totaled 5 years of missed birthdays, holidays, and Sunday dinners. The mediator proposed a framework focused entirely on sister's needs: housing stability, educational continuity, medical care, emotional support. She drew diagrams on the whiteboard, mapping out potential custody arrangements. Anton's wife interrupted repeatedly, insisting they deserved compensation for caregiving. The mediator redirected her each time back to sister. I watched sister through the conference room window. She sat in the hallway with a social worker, coloring in a book, her thin shoulders hunched over the pages. Every few minutes, she glanced up at the closed door, then returned to her careful coloring. The social worker offered her juice boxes that she refused. The guardian ad litem presented her recommendations. Sister needed stability above all else. The constant conflict was destroying her physical and mental health. She required consistent medical care for her stress-induced conditions. Most importantly, she needed the adults in her life to stop weaponizing her in their war. Anton's relapse complicated custody discussions. His recent positive alcohol test raised concerns about sister's safety. His wife argued it was a single slip under extreme stress. The guardian noted that relapses often escalated during high-conflict situations. She recommended supervised visits until he demonstrated sustained sobriety. My homelessness presented equal challenges. Living in a car disqualified me from primary custody. The guardian acknowledged my bond with sister but emphasized practical realities. Children needed bedrooms, consistent addresses, stable environments. My current situation provided none of these essentials. The mediator suggested selling Grandma's house to fund sister's needs. The proceeds could establish a trust for her education and medical care. Both Anton and I would have structured visitation. Neither would have primary custody until we stabilized our respective situations. The proposal felt like Solomon's sword. Anton's wife exploded at the suggestion. They'd invested everything in that house. The renovations alone cost $20,000. She pulled out receipts, waving them frantically. The mediator calmly noted that unauthorized improvements during probate created their own legal complications. We broke for lunch. I sat in my car eating crackers from a gas station. Through the windshield, I watched Anton's family at a nearby restaurant. Sister picked at her food while Anton's wife gestured angrily. His teenage son looked exhausted. Anton stared at his untouched meal. The afternoon session focused on Grandma's sealed letter. Her handwriting, shaky but determined, filled 3 pages. She'd known about Anton's financial struggles, my career ambitions. She'd made calculated decisions based on perceived need. The house was meant as payment for care, not inheritance. She'd trusted me to understand eventually. Her words about sister hit hardest. She'd worried about the child's future, caught between 2 grandchildren who might fight over assets. She'd begged us to prioritize sister's well-being over property. The letter ended with a plea for family unity that we'd already shattered beyond repair. The forensic accountant testified about the suspicious patterns, cash withdrawals matching Anton's deposits, timing that suggested systematic transfers. But he also noted the grocery receipts, medical expenses, and household bills Anton had paid. The financial abuse was real, but intertwined with genuine caregiving expenses. Anton's breakdown came suddenly. He started sobbing, admitting the renovation costs had destroyed him financially. He'd borrowed against credit cards, depleted retirement savings. The house needed more work than expected. Grandma's old plumbing had failed. The electrical system required updating. He'd spent everything chasing an asset that was eating him alive. His wife tried to comfort him, but he pushed her away. He admitted she'd pressured him to secure the house. Their marriage was crumbling under financial strain. His relapse had started with one drink to calm his nerves, then spiraled. He'd failed everyone: Grandma, sister, his own children, himself. The judge ordered a recess. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face. My reflection showed hollow eyes, stress-thinned hair, premature lines. The fight had aged me a decade. I thought about Grandma's words: we come from survivors. But survival looked different than I'd imagined. When we reconvened, the mediator presented a modified proposal. The house would be sold immediately. Proceeds would first cover Grandma's outstanding debts and funeral expenses. The remainder would be divided: 40% to a trust for sister, 30% to cover Anton's documented caregiving expenses, 30% to me. Both sides had objections. Anton's wife calculated their expenses as higher. I argued the financial abuse warranted reducing his percentage. The mediator reminded us that continuing litigation would consume whatever inheritance remained. Legal fees were already approaching $40,000 combined. Sister's guardian supported the proposal with modifications. Sisters coloring in the hallway while the adults color their lives with legal chaos feels like the perfect metaphor here. Except her artwork probably makes more sense than this custody calculator the mediator's drawing on the whiteboard. She wanted strict oversight of the trust funds. Both Anton and I would need to demonstrate stability before accessing custody. She recommended therapeutic reunification to repair our damaged relationships with sister. The focus must shift from winning to healing. The extended family members present offered mixed reactions. Uncle Benjamin supported the compromise, exhausted by months of choosing sides. Cousins who'd borrowed money from Anton felt conflicted. Aunts who'd witnessed my absence struggled with sympathy. Grandma's church friends just wanted the public fighting to end. We spent another hour refining details. The house would be listed immediately at market value. A neutral real estate agent would handle the sale. The trust would be managed by a professional fiduciary. Custody arrangements would be reviewed monthly based on our progress toward stability. Anton's teenage son asked to speak. His voice shook as he described watching his family disintegrate. His parents fought constantly about money. His little sister had nightmares about losing her home. He begged us to accept the compromise for the children's sake. His raw pain silenced the room. The final agreement took shape slowly. Neither Anton nor I would get what we'd wanted. The house that held our memories would go to strangers. The inheritance Grandma had saved would mostly disappear into legal fees and sister's care. We'd both lost more than we could ever have gained. I signed the papers with a shaking hand. Anton signed next, his signature barely legible. His wife signed as witness, tears streaming. The mediator collected the documents, explaining next steps: court approval, house listing, trust establishment. The war was ending not with victory, but with exhausted surrender. Outside the courthouse, Anton and I passed without speaking. His teenage son helped him to their car. I watched them drive away, a broken family held together by necessity. Sister would go home with them tonight. I'd have supervised visitation on weekends once I secured housing. Mrs. Bankowski called that evening. She'd heard about the settlement from church friends. Her voice carried relief that the fighting would end. She reminded me about Grandma's rose cutting, still growing in her greenhouse. I could have it whenever I was ready. Something beautiful had survived the destruction. I drove to Grandma's house one last time. The for sale sign stood in the yard where her roses once bloomed. Anton's renovations showed through the windows. Modern fixtures replacing Grandma's vintage charm. Soon strangers would live here, unaware of the family war that had raged over these walls. The next morning, I applied for 3 apartments, using the settlement letter as proof of incoming funds. The first 2 landlords rejected me immediately. My recent homelessness and unemployment were red flags. The third, an elderly woman who'd known Grandma through church, agreed to consider me. I also applied for jobs at every hospital within driving distance. My suspension would make things difficult, but I needed income beyond the settlement. One nursing home called back immediately, desperate for staff. The pay was less, the work harder, but it was a start. The house sold within 2 weeks to a young couple expecting their first child. They paid asking price, eager to move in before the baby arrived. I heard they planned to install a playground where Grandma's garden had been. The closing was scheduled for the following month. During my first supervised visit with sister, we sat awkwardly in a community center playroom. She showed me her drawings feelings from therapy. Less dark now, more colorful. She asked if I still lived in my car. I explained about the apartment application, the job possibility. She nodded but didn't smile. Anton arrived to pick her up exactly on time. We didn't speak, just nodded acknowledgement. Sister hugged me briefly before taking his hand. I watched them leave together, her small fingers wrapped in his larger ones. The supervisor made notes about our interaction. 2 weeks later, I moved into a studio apartment above the elderly landlord's garage. It was small but clean, with a window overlooking her garden. She'd known Grandma for 40 years, remembered me as a child. She charged below market rate, saying Grandma would have wanted me housed. The nursing home job started the following Monday. I worked night shifts, caring for elderly patients who reminded me of Grandma. Some had dementia, calling for people long gone. I held their hands, spoke softly, provided comfort I'd failed to give when it mattered most. Mrs. Spankowski visited on my day off, bringing Grandma's rose cutting. We planted it together in the community garden behind my apartment building. The roots were strong, the first buds already forming. She told me roses were resilient, like the women who grew them. The trust paperwork arrived, showing Sister's fund established with $42,000 after all expenses. It would cover her therapy, medical needs, and start a college fund. Not life-changing money, but enough to help. The trustee would manage it carefully until she turned 18. Anton started attending AA meetings again. I knew because Victoria mentioned it during a chance encounter at the grocery store. She said he was committed to recovery, working the steps again. His marriage was struggling but surviving. His kids were in therapy too. My second supervised visit with Sister went better. She showed me her improved grades, talked about friends at school. She asked if I'd plant flowers at my new apartment. I told her about Grandma's rose, how it was already growing. She almost smiled, said she'd like to see it someday. The final estate documents arrived on a Tuesday. Everything was settled, divided, distributed. Grandma's lifetime reduced to paper and signatures. I received my check, deposited it immediately. Most went to paying off debts, establishing emergency savings, survival money, not wealth. I kept one photo from the settlement. Grandma in her garden, surrounded by roses in full bloom. Her smile was radiant, her hands dirty from planting. This was how I chose to remember her, not the legal battles and bitter divisions that followed. Beauty before destruction. 6 months later, Sister's therapist recommended beginning unsupervised visits. I'd maintained stable housing and employment. Anton had stayed sober. We were both healing slowly, separately. The therapist believed Sister was ready for less structured time with each of us. Our first unsupervised visit was at the park. Sister pushed herself on the swings while I watched. She talked about school, friends, her new art class. She didn't mention the war that had nearly destroyed us all. Children adapted, moved forward. Adults carried scars longer. Anton and I developed a wordless routine for exchanges. He'd drop Sister at the community center entrance. I'd pick her up there. We'd nod, nothing more. The hatred had faded to exhaustion. We were strangers who shared blood and bitter history. One evening, Sister asked to see Grandma's rose. We walked to the community garden where it climbed a small trellis. Pink blooms covered the branches, their scent carrying on the breeze. Sister touched the petals gently, said it smelled like Grandma's house used to, memory preserved in fragrance. The young couple who bought Grandma's house invited the neighborhood to a housewarming. I didn't attend, but heard about it later. They'd kept some of Grandma's fruit trees, added vegetable gardens. Life continued in spaces where we'd fought over death's remnants. Sister started spending alternate weekends with me. We developed our own traditions. Saturday morning pancakes, library visits, walks in the park. She helped me tend Grandma's rose, learning about pruning and feeding. Her hands in the soil reminded me of Grandma teaching me decades ago. Anton's teenage son graduated high school that spring. I wasn't invited to the ceremony but sent a card. He'd earned scholarships despite the family chaos. He wrote back, thanking me, saying he understood why we'd fought, but wished we'd found another way. Wisdom beyond his years. The anniversary of Grandma's death arrived with spring rain. I visited her grave alone in the early morning, bringing roses from her cutting. The headstone was simple, elegant. Fresh flowers already lay there. Anton had come earlier. We still grieved separately, parallel but never intersecting. Sister grew stronger as months passed. Her stomach problems resolved. Her anxiety decreased. She stopped drawing dark pictures, started painting landscapes. The therapist credited the stability both Anton and I now provided. Separately, we were healing her. I thought about Grandma's letter often, her pragmatism that had divided us, her understanding of our flaws. She'd made an impossible choice between imperfect grandchildren. The war that followed proved she'd been right about our natures. Anton's greed, my absence, both our capacities for destruction, but we'd survived, as she'd instructed. Not intact, not victorious, but breathing. The family was fractured beyond repair, but Sister had stability. The house was gone, but roses grew in a community garden. We'd lost fortunes in legal fees, but gained hard wisdom. Pyrrhic victory, as predicted. Grandma's rose bloomed magnificently that second spring, climbing higher than expected. Neighbors stopped to admire it, asking about its history. I told them simply, it came from my grandmother's garden, a survivor transplanted. Like all of us, roots damaged but still growing, reaching for whatever light remained. Thanks for reading this story with me. I hope you have a wonderful day filled with small moments of healing.